New York and on the new Hot 97 app. Ebro in the morning on Hot 97.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is going down. We have a hip-hop icon, art icon, culture icon, filmmaker whose new project, Grass is Greener, is available Saturday on Netflix. Fab Five, Freddy in the house.
Good morning, New York. In the tri-state area. I'm in the building, baby. We doing it. Yes, sir. It's going down.
My favorite thing about seeing Fab Five Freddy is that when you see him, I feel 12 years old again because he looks the exact same.
I know.
You are the same guy as your MTV Raps 1990.
I've been blessed. And I'm a vampire, so what the hell? You know how we do. It's a slower process going on over here.
So tell us a little bit about, speaking of the tricks to the trade,
yeah.
Did any of these tricks come from Cannabis? What can we learn in Grass is Greener, which comes out Saturday?
This film is for all the people that were ever stopped and frisked, that were harassed for like burning that plant, you know what I mean? One of the oldest medicines on record, going back to China, to ancient India. And just, unfortunately, one of those things that this country was built on, racism, was something that was heavily involved in the plant's criminalization, and hence the overwhelming, disproportionate criminalization of people of color from the 1930s, even prior to the 1930s, up until right now. It continues, even when you see all the it's, folks making money off the plant, straight.
That's legal.
Of course.
Yeah, cornball nerds jumping in the game, which is okay. But homies on the corners that was feeding their family and taking care of their loved ones, holding it down for this harmless flower, have been disproportionately, thrown in jail, in prisons across the country. So the film looks at that history, starting with jazz, which was what popularized the plant. Dozens of records made by jazz legends about reefer, weed, vipers as they were once known back in the 20s and 30s. So you can go on YouTube right now and just type in jazz reefer songs and dozens will come up. So I start there with that history. And as that was bringing people of different ethnic backgrounds together to come and hear this music, racists didn't want to see that happen. So essentially,
is that the beginning of when the disparity
That's the beginning.
occurred?
That's the beginning right there. Imagine in the 1920s in New Orleans, and some white folks want to come and hear some black folks play some music and have a good time and raise their glasses and maybe pass that blunt or pass that joint back and forth. Racists didn't like that. And so that led them to criminalize the plant and focus on black and brown folks.
So when did it take place, the initial criminalization of marijuana?
In 1937.
Okay, and it started in what state, in Louisiana?
No, Louisiana is critical and key in my film because as we, if you don't know, jazz was born there.
That's right.
And so people were sort of mixing a little bit. There was a little bit of allowing people to come together. There's a place called Congo Square where black folks, slaves, could come and jam on the weekends. This is now in Louis Armstrong Park. Louis Armstrong, by the way, is featured in my film as a prominent cannabis smoker and an advocate. We filmed in his former home, now a museum out in Queens, with Larry Ratso Sloman, who wrote the first book on reefer madness that broke down how this racism and this criminalization worked and has still worked. So I take it from there, from that jazz era. We bring it up into the bebop jazz scene. I get into the beat poetry scene with Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac that then push that into the mainstream via hippie culture, counterculture of the 60s, anti-war.
Well, is that in some ways when the disparity becomes even more clear? Because in the 60s, when white kids all started smoking pot.
And it was never like a thing, you
right,
know what I
it
mean?
wasn't the same level.
Well, the super hip white kids knew because I tell a story about a guy by the name of Mez Mesereau, who was a white, Jewish clarinet player from Chicago who had the best weed in that time frame. His weed was so good that the slang for good weed was, yo, he got that mez. You got that mighty mez. I need the mez, baby. The mez became that thing. You can Google him. He's a fact. In fact, he was so down with the brothers and the flavor that when he got busted for some weed, right after criminalization went into effect, they threw him on Rikers Island, everything was super segregated. He was like, yo, you got me wrong. I'm really a brother. I need to be in the colored section. And he wrote a letter to the warden, and they moved him over to the, because, that's who he moved with. He was down with that flavor. In fact, Mez wrote one of the best books on jazz of that era called Really the Blues, where he also breaks down some of the slang that cats talked in that time. Some of that slang has lasted until today, but those jazz cats wrote that Bible of early slang.
Was jazz always big for you musically?
Yeah, jazz was a big part of my life growing up because my father, who I talk about in the film and the kind of family life I grew up around, my dad grew up in the jazz scene. That was like what hip-hop was for us, jazz was for him in that period. And Max Roach was my dad's best friend growing up in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, and he became my godfather. So my father just was immersed in all that music from his period, going back to Duke Ellington, all the way up to bebop, Miles Davis. You see, I'm wearing my John Coltrane shirt today.
Nice.
So that was a part of the legacy. And my dad and his friends indulged. They were cannabis connoisseurs. They smoked the best. They talked about what was going on the planet, what was happening here, there, and everywhere. So I was a little kid absorbing all that and getting a contact high.
Of course you were.
I mean, yes. Wow. I mean, it says you have Killer Mike on here, Damian Marley. Who else do you have featured on the movie?
Snoop.
Of course.
Chuck D says some words. David Banner says some words. CeeLo Green, Dougie Fresh. And a lot of people that have been on the front line of the cannabis prohibition fight. People like Asha Bandele, who was a part of the DPA, Drug Policy Alliance. She's a noted poet and a writer. Cassandra Frederique, who's the New York State Director of the Drug Policy Alliance, and one of the key lobbyists up in Albany. Crystal Peoples-Stokes, the majority leader of the state assembly, who's been fighting to get not just legalization in New York, but somewhat a form of, reparations, if you will, for the disproportionate, disruption, devastation of generations of families that have been picked on, homies on the corner, stopped and frisked, had a joint in your pocket and had to go into the system. So they've been waging this fight to get some just due for those that have paid the price in New York State. So they invited me up, about 50 state senators and assemblymen watched my film, and all I can tell you, boys, have your tissues ready.
Wow.
There's some touching things that just happened in the course of filming that weren't really planned, and they even shifted the focus of the film a little more. I didn't really realize myself. We went to different parts of the country to see what was going on.
I mean, from state to state, the laws are different, and we've read about countless people that are doing life in jail for marijuana.
So there's one really, really moving situation. When we were putting the research together, we're trying to find a situation that could really highlight this. And there's a man by the name of Bernard Noble from New Orleans who was given 14 years for 2 joints worth of cannabis.
Oh, my God.
His priors were only nonviolent possession. And the way the laws are set up in a lot of southern states, you can get 14 years for having 2 joints while people are going to dispensaries and vaping and edibles and a lot of other places. This is still going on, so I'm happy to be able to shine a light.
Yeah, I imagine it's one of those issues that in some ways when people talk about it, they don't talk about it so seriously. It's like, oh, it's fun, it's pot. Yeah, I know it's legal. But there really are these serious storylines that go with it that have so much to do with the disparity between white and black in this country. Because the experience as a white teenager in the suburbs of smoking pot, the risk involved in it is almost fun. It's not something you're really worried about. I mean, it's just something you get caught by parents or
slap on the wrist.
Slap on the wrist. Or let's say you really get caught in a bad spot and you had like an ounce or, a quarter, whatever it is, and something does happen. Right. Even then, you're connected to people. It's a smaller town. Someone knows someone. The lawyer is like, we'll work out a deal. It'll get expunged when you're 18.
Break it down, Rosenberg.
And then you move on with your life.
Yeah, and as
the same teenagers in the hood, sorry, Laura, the same teenagers in the hood of color, they don't have the connections. The book gets thrown at them. The process starts, and we're off and running to a life change that didn't have to be that way for typical teenage mischief.
There was a lot of times too that it was like in Black and Latino neighborhoods, like if one person had a joint, smoking a joint, whoever was around, they would arrest all of them and they would all end up going to jail.
Totally, disproportionate. So these facts are highlighted in my film from back then with the numbers, the data, the statistics. You know, we go deep in this one, which was amazing. It just was unfolding right in front of me. Timing, everything just converged for this Grass is Greener film that everybody could tune in and light up on 420 and really get, be entertained and educated.
On Netflix, by the way. And were you always a big weed head? Obviously, you grew up around it.
Yeah, no doubt. It was cannabis, like folks, grow up having fine wines and spirits in their house. Yeah, fine cannabis was in my house.
So during the MTV Raps days?
Yes.
How often were you high during your Raps?
I couldn't. I'm a late afternoon, evening kind of guy. I have to be 100%.
So not for shoots. You didn't want to be high.
No, never ever. But however, as we now have gotten, particularly if you travel to states that have, of course, first medical and then recreational, when you now can get specific strains that can keep you feeling certain ways, as opposed to getting whatever your Weed Connect had, which might be an indica, which will put you on a downslope. You can now say, I need that sativa hybrid so I can be up peppy and handle my biz. You feel me?
So you didn't want to gamble. Back in the day when you didn't know what you're getting.
Yeah, because back in the days, cats might have that chocolate tie, whatever them strains was that might have you on some, like I'm just sitting back, baby. I'm feeling like this. When I can't be like that when I'm doing my job, you feel me? I had to be on top of my game 110%. Right. That's how I roll. So I'm like, you know what? Because there was one show that I did. It's funny when I was thinking about this. I had MTV pull the footage. I interviewed. It was right after the period when I had directed Snoop's first video, What's My Name? And I was deeply embedded in that West Coast scene at that time and did your MTV rap show with all the Dog Pound. And Snoop lit up like we blaze, along that past the peace pipe vibe. He had some really good chocolate tie. And when them cameras roll, even with the shades on, people was hitting me up like, Fab, you was smashed. I was like,
no. Was Snoop, he's obviously now notorious for how much weed he smoked.
Jesus.
Was he the first that blew your mind in that way? Or was it Cypress Hill first? Or was there other people we're not even thinking? Redman? I mean, is there anyone that you remember in the early days that you were blown away by how much weed they smoked?
At that time, Snoop, he was just getting his paper up. So cats wasn't really doing the blunt thing all the time. So it was still rolling joints. They would pull out that what was that paper they used out there? Was it Zigzag?
Uh-huh.
Different papers in different places. And so it was more joints, but it was really good weed at the time when I was out there in L.A.
Especially as a New Yorker in L.A., right?
Was literally the strain that was on the street. That was the popular name. And in the film, Snoop explains how he told Dre, this is what you need to name your album. Because Dre was not really as avid a smoke as everybody else around when I was with them doing that process. So, but yeah, Snoop was a pretty aggressive smoke. But when you with the homies and them kind of vibes and everybody's lighting up and the joints are passing around and then you smoke and then at a certain point I'm like, yo, what happened?
I know some cats keep going. I have had a few experiences where I've been, no pun intended, blown away by how much cats like literally like blunts to themselves. Like the cats who have blunts and don't pass.
I'm gonna tell you who was doing that blunt thing back then. That really was a Biggie. Biggie was he was a chain blunt smoker.
Right.
Rolling, like C's and them would be twisting, and Biggie would just be lighting them. And I'd be like, wow, like I'd take 2-3 hits of that and I'm good.
And he was just
Biggie was burning them down.
That's so interesting.
4-alarm fire. Yes.
Sometimes I'm like, how higher can you get after a while?
So the thing about cannabis is like this. This is interesting on the medical side. we all in our bodies have what's known as the endocannabinoid system. We have receptors specifically for cannabis. So when one person may be able to burn 2, 3, 4, 5 blunts and can still function, whereas another person, 2, 3, 4 good pulls is good. And so that's based on your endocannabinoid system, how much cannabis your body...
And does that get affected by how much you smoke too? Because obviously people build
absolutely.
up over time.
It's just like some people can just do a whole lot of something, whether it's this, that, or third, and be functioning, and another person is on the floor. Be like pick him up, like pick her up.
Yes.
They're laying on the floor.
I know that experience.
I just want to drop. I'm sorry. I just want to say there's another interesting thing that is comparable to the story I tell about Mesero. I tell a story of Harlem's kind of cannabis dealing legend back in that time period, back in the '90s. A brother by the name of Branson.
Oh yeah, Branson. That name's been thrown around in hip hop many times.
Absolutely.
Branson's spot being
Branson had consistently had the best cannabis at that time that coincided in the early '90s with Biggie, with
Biggie's who
Redman,
shouted him out,
with the Locks. Over 70 songs shouted out.
That many
70 records mentioned going to see Branson, getting that. So like Branson's one of them rare classic individual hustlers that you don't see no clips on him talking about what he did in the streets, because he didn't need to do that. You know, real hustlers move in silence. You feel me?
Right.
And so I was able to talk to my homie Branson. He's in the juice, but he has an incredible juice bar on St. Nicholas Avenue called Branson's Got Juice. He's always been serving the community effectively with whatever it is he chooses. But but straight up. But back in them days, Branson had that thing when other cats was getting that Colombian or Mexican and cleaning seeds out the weed, and the little seeds was falling out, burning your shirt. Branson had that good green when it was new on the scene. So therefore, Biggie, Redman, numerous times, the Locks, and a long list of MCs shouted them out. So I get Branson to tell the story.
That's so dope. So we're getting a lot of personal stories, but we're also getting history lessons in this film.
Yeah, it all came together. You know, my original intention was to show the connections musically, which I do, from the beginning, because it's been synonymous with the plant in American music, all the cutting-edge people. I had wanted to even dip into the R&B side of it. You know, Rick James making Mary Jane, D'Angelo making Brown Sugar. Those were songs about the plant. You know, I wanted to interview, I had talked to George Clinton. We was going to film him in the Black Smithsonian in front of the mothership talking about the weed he was burning back in the 70s when he was on them Parliament tours. But you know, I only had 90 or so minutes to tell the story. So.
Right, so you had to do what you had to do.
Grass is green.
On a separate note, just in your career in general, which has spanned so much all around things that you love, so many kids out there watch these videos, I think, and don't know how to get to what it is they're passionate about. How did you manage to find a way from a very young age all the way to now to always make a living around the things that you're passionate about?
Wow. That's a good question. Well, I guess a key is, once again, which I give a snapshot of in this film, Grass is Green, is like it's the house and the people I grew up around. Highly intelligent individuals that were not afraid to pick up a book. So a lot of books were around me. I was very curious. I was always asking a lot of questions. I wanted to know and put 2 and 2 together, saw that 4 was right there, and I can go for that. And found people that would be open to my ideas culturally, but also business-wise. You know, I was a big fan of Andy Warhol as a kid, seeing what he did in art, seeing that he was seemingly able to have fun and also get the bills paid. And then coming on the downtown scene, finding people that was supporting those ideas early on before any of this stuff existed. People on the downtown scene in New York that embraced me, Glenn O'Brien, people from Blondie, Chris Stein, Debbie Harry, kind of mentored me, as well as Jean-Michel Basquiat, my homie back then, Keith
Never
Haring.
have heard anyone refer to Basquiat on a first-name basis.
Yeah.
And it's real life. That's
I
actually
know.
real life.
No, that was my partners in crime. You know, we put our heads together and was planning on making the moves that I'm blessed to be here to still make in the tradition and things that we laid down. And so, yeah, once we broke out there and we found some people that were supportive, embraced us, and it's been a blessing.
How big was the shout out for you on record by Debbie Harry?
That was a good one. That was crazy. At that point, when Rapture dropped, early 80s, I'm in the video, and she's saying Fab Five Freddy told me everybody's fly. I'm still in Bed-Stuy at the time. I'm still on the blocks, and everybody thought I was rich. They said, yo, like,
Just because your name's on the record.
Not even on it. Like, you in a video, you're rich. What's going on? Why are you still here? And I was like, what are you talking about? It doesn't work like that.
You don't get a shout out and instantly the money just starts pouring in.
People cats in the hood. But really, though, that still was a piece of a puzzle that didn't find a place to fit into, really, until Yo MTV Raps happened and kind of put me on a national platform. And then when people go, wait, that's the guy that she was mentioning on the song. Now I understand. So
because we're talking several years later that happened.
Exactly.
And at that point, when you had those relationships and you got the opportunity at Yo MTV Raps, had you thought of yourself as a television presenter
that
before
was
that?
never even on the program. I mean, even myself ended up being in Wildstyle, the first film on hip hop, which I had the idea for, pitched it to Charlie Ahern. He said, let's make a movie. I was just comfortable playing the back. That was my intention. But at the 11th hour, Charlie Ahern was like, we had this one character, like the promoter in Wildstyle, that was the bridge between the graffiti scene and the hip hop scene. Of course. And Charlie was looking at me weird. I said, why are you looking at me like that? He was like, Fred, you can be that character. But I was still living at home in Brooklyn, in Bed-Stuy, and Jean-Michel was living in the city. He was and then, after hanging out on the downtown scene, I'd have to take that A-train ride all the way back to, the Bed-Stuy, to Utica, Kingston and Troop or whatever on the A. And I'd be like, man, if I get that little bit of extra money playing this part, I can get my own apartment and live in the city, live downtown Manhattan and be in the scene,
Not have to go all the way back to
Not have to take that long A-train ride home.
Where was your first downtown apartment?
On Clinton. I lived on Clinton, below Houston. I think it was 42 Clinton.
Yeah.
Then on Ludlow, right around the corner from Katz's Deli. I think I was 170 Ludlow. It's like high-rise hotels across the street now. It's crazy.
Wow.
Further down on Ludlow. And then Yo MTV Raps kicked in. I was still living down there because everybody in the city wasn't wired for cable at that time. And then some stick-up kids on the block, like a little cutie that was kind of flirting with me, let me know these kids was coming to get me.
Oh, he trying to set you up.
They was trying to set me up because they was mad jealous. And so one night I was walking up, I was in an apartment on the top floor in Ludlow, and I could hear these cats moving around the roof, coming down that staircase, and I knew. So it was like, do I go to get my man and get the burner and get stupid? Nah, let me move. It's time to move. So
you just left.
I had to jet, because I was like, wait a minute, I had to turn that street thing off and get smart about it.
But it's interesting, you being that guy is actually what made Yo MTV Rap so great. When I think about it, you weren't a host, you weren't a presenter, you were, but you really just seemed like the cool dude who was there with everybody.
But I think that's what made it so popular.
That's what made the show so good.
You saw your homie. Like, you saw your homie on TV.
And it wouldn't. And now in retrospect, it couldn't have worked any other way. It would have felt so commercial and whack if they'd had someone else do it. Like, you were the perfect person to present that.
So let me ask you a question. So when Wildstyle dropped, right? Because it was the first movie of its kind. How was it embraced?
Okay, so the idea
because hip hop was so like,
let me tell you,
it was so central. Like, it wasn't a popular
I think it is often because it is the gift that keeps on giving. When Charlie Ahern and I made Wildstyle, our intent was to rock the homies in the hood, the Bronx, Harlem, Bed-Stuy, the people that took their $2, $3 and went to 40 Deuce to go into them theaters and see 2 or 3 kung fu movies and take their girl with the matching sweatshirts and the name, all that fly shit that's now iconicized everywhere. We wanted to rock for that audience and our downtown artsy friends. Those were our intentions.
Okay.
When the thing, we couldn't even envision that this culture could translate internationally because it's all heavily language based.
Right.
Man, when they picked it up in England and Holland and Germany, we started getting reports. We were like, what? And it just was above and beyond, and it continues to be that. Like,
Was it critically received?
critically. In the downtown press, which we targeted at that time, you had the Village Voice,
The
Soho
Village Voice
Weekly
loved it, okay.
News. That was our base. You know, we had those places were who we. That's why we were downtown. That was downtown press. They were open. They had ideas. Mainstream press, for the most part, didn't mess with us. One guy that, interesting story, he's featured in the film. His name is Steve Hager. So Steve Hager wrote a big story for the Daily News. It was a show that I curated of graffiti art and what I guess you would consider post-graffiti at the Mud Club. This show featured all the players, myself, Jean-Michel, Keith Haring, Futura 2000, Lee Quinones. Everybody was in this show. Steve Hager wrote a story that was praising what we were doing without really bashing us. At this time, there was no positive press about graffiti or any of this. Anybody that what they had to the side had black and brown skin were depicted as criminals in New York press overall. And so, so that was like how that really popped off.
Wow.
And when Wildstyle dropped to it had to be a huge catapult for like Lady Pink and Lee, and it had to.
It did, but it continued. It was like a nice marathon because the movie didn't open nationally. It opened in the city. We crushed it in New York. But then, and this is pre even VHS. This shit is ancient Flintstones type era. This shit go back so far, to be honest with you. But it is amazing how over these years the film served as that first piece that people in different places saw. People breakdancing, people spray painting their names, DJs spinning, rappers rapping, and people's like, yo, that's me. I can be that too. So to hear stories of people wanting to get in this culture around the world, that film was a spark. And also your MTV Raps was the same way.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's a humbling, blessed experience to be able to, get those stories and feel that love.
And now here we are in 2019, and Grass is Greener comes out this Saturday. You're an amazing storyteller, so I'm sure the story that you're going to tell in this film is going to be fantastic.
Yeah,
Thank
I'm
you,
looking
man.
forward to it.
Thanks, guys.
Congrats, man. This is really dope.
Appreciate being there. Yeah, 420, y'all. Netflix, get your bill paid up.
Yeah.
Tune in, y'all.
Burn up and enjoy. Fab Five Freddy.
Oh,
Thank you,
yeah,
man.
and I'm Fab New York. Hit me up on the IG, Fab 5 Freddy on IG, Fab New York on Twitter. We doing it, y'all. Get at me, show me some love. And when you see the movie, let me know how you feel about it, straight up. I'm ready for you.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you, Peter.
My man.